Hello and welcome to NESCOM's NISC 2020. My name is Ashutosh Sharma. I'm from Forrester Research and I'm here to talk about how businesses can drive success in the next decade by adopting what Forrester calls future fit technology strategy. But before I go forward, let me just congratulate each of us for making it this far. We are finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. 2020 is one of the most unusual years, is likely to be behind us soon. And most importantly, with the advent of some promising new vaccines, we should be able to put this pandemic, which has disrupted our life, business, completely behind us. In fact, just to give you an idea of how badly pandemic impacted us, we did a survey in which we asked firms how their revenues were impacted. Almost 4 out of 5, 80% or more firms actually said that their revenue declined or stayed flat in this year. Only a handful were able to achieve growth. They were either in the right industry or they had invested probably in the right set of technologies which allowed them to achieve growth in these times. Most of us struggled. In fact, I was just looking at the airline industry, which is one of the most severely impacted industries. And I found that while pandemic, of course, provided us a lot of grief, it also provided us a lot of lessons. Let me share some examples from that airline industry to you. On the left, I have provided an example of Etihad Airline. You know, Etihad is one of the largest airlines in Middle East, and they have this huge fleet of airplanes which need to be constantly serviced even when they are in operations. So what Etihad did, the moment the pandemic hit and the fleet had to be grounded, they decided to use this time to comprehensively maintain all of these planes. Because when the time comes to fly again, they can have these planes in operations longer than usual because they had just gone through that comprehensive maintenance. And that will allow them to not lose those productive hours in which they can earn revenue from these planes. So Etihad was trying to invest in resiliency of its operations while the pandemic was raging on. The second example is from KLM. KLM and many other airlines like KLM, they were trying to figure out how can they adapt to some of these changing situations around them, and how can they invest, how can they run their operations even when pandemic was not allowing them to carry passengers like you and I. So they converted their passenger planes into freighters. Mind you, it's not an easy job. Airline is a very highly regulated industry. So airlines have to take a lot of approvals. They have to change their operations. They have to change the way they carry their logistics. But they did all of that somehow to survive, somehow to earn revenue from these assets which were otherwise lying idle. More importantly, they had to keep them in air because when the planes are not flying, they have to keep in storage, which can be very, very expensive. In fact, some airlines went to the extent of flying ghost flights in which there were no passengers, but they wanted to keep the planes operational. That brings me to the third example. This is Qantas. What Qantas did was really amazing. Qantas flew a flight to nowhere. It started from Sydney, landed at Sydney. The only difference was it had 150 passengers, paying passengers. And what Qantas did was to take off from Sydney with these passengers, go up the Gold Coast, go up to the Great Barrier Reef, make a hard left, come to the center of the continent, to Uluru Rock, and come back to Sydney. In this entire journey, Qantas brought its plane down to as low as 4,000 feet to offer amazing views to its customers. Now, these passengers, when they heard that Qantas was announcing this flight, the flight actually got sold out in less than 10 minutes. So Qantas identified a need that passengers want to fly, and it also needed to keep its plane in the air. And before that, EVA in Korea and ANA in Japan also tried something very similar. So airlines are trying to be resilient, adaptive, and creative in dealing with the pandemic. And that brings me to other industries as well. So it's not just airlines. In fact, we are finding 68% of the businesses believe that resiliency is going to be really key for them in the next decade so that they can survive. 84% of them believe, the business leaders, that they wish that they had invested in technology that allows them to be flexible, that basically makes them adaptive. And about 80% of them believe that their firm is not perceived as creative enough, whether it comes to customer experience, product development, operations, or many other functions. So businesses believe they need to be resilient, adaptive, and creative. So our research is showing firms are looking at developing these traits. However, most of them are not prepared to deal with the next decade. The level of maturity, level of adaptivity, creativity, and resiliency that they built is not enough. Businesses have to be like this tree, one which can withstand heavy storms and winds and still stay upright. They need to be rooted in customer obsession. They need to invest in adaptable core, flexible, which allows them to withstand changes, makes them resilient. And today, unfortunately, it's not so. What in fact we are finding in last 10 odd years, in fact 20 odd years, the technology productivity has actually fallen. So the amount of productivity improvement, a certain amount of technology investment provided you actually has gone down progressively over last 20, 30 years. Businesses are constantly reaching out to us and asking how can they make their digital investments pay for them. The second one is about this digital sameness that we see around us. In fact, we all have access to the same tools, same skills, same technology, same skills, same capabilities. And as a result, we are all building very similar solutions. The moment someone comes up with a creative new solution, the competitors are able to copy it because it's built using similar technologies. As a result, we are finding a digital sameness everywhere. Airlines have very similar applications, banks have very similar applications. And in fact, one of the most interesting data point we have is on our customer experience index. We have been tracking CX index across more than hundreds of brands over last decade. In last few years, what we are finding, the pace at which the CX index was improving has actually plateaued. The CX index performance is not that differentiating as it was in the past. And as a result, firms have to invest in more ways to differentiate themselves from each other. The third issue that we are finding is around unaddressed technical debt. This kind of feeds back into the first point. If you have a technical debt, the ability of differentiation, ability of improvement, tech productivity that you can drive is going to be limited. In fact, firms are reaching out to us saying that while they have invested in digital over the last few years, because of the technical debt, because of this legacy, because of these siloed stovepipes that they have created over the years, they are not able to move fast enough. So they need to pay off this technical debt before they can move forward. And the last, but again, one of the most important thing is around the change, around the business uncertainty that has been rising. So last 1 year was, of course, pandemic. But before pandemic, if you port yourself back to 2019, November and December, you will remember we were grappling with the trade wars. We were grappling with the geopolitical risks. So these certain uncertainties have certainly increased in last. I noticed the pun that's used there, but the uncertainty has certainly increased, and it's likely to be like this over next decade or so, or even longer. Your customers are changing rapidly, your employees are changing rapidly, the external environment is changing rapidly. So if there may not be hopefully a pandemic, but what if there's a security related disruption? What, God forbid, a war breaks out? So some of those uncertainties are something that we have to be prepared to deal with. We need to invest in resilient infrastructure. And what we are also finding, the pandemic has actually given us some interesting lessons, which will be coming in handy, and also helping us develop very specific strategy elements for our business to deal with these upcoming changes. These shifts that we are noticing as a result of pandemic are not new, but have certainly become more pronounced of late. So for example, your customers have had their tryst with digital more so than before in last 1 year. And they are increasingly digitizing their entire value stream, entire level of engagement, right from researching, buying, using, engaging. The entire life cycle of customers is becoming digital. And you need to be able to prepare to deal with that. But while it's becoming digital, will it become completely digital? Probably not. There might be some physical elements that might still remain. So, in the interim, you still have to deal with both. You need to invest in infrastructure that allows you to create hybrid experiences. Then comes the employee side of it. The future of work is coming at us rapidly. While we were talking about automation as of last year and some of the related changes because of that, pandemic has thrown this new dimension of remote work, collaboration, connectivity, security, and all of these factors at the same time not being in office has its own sort of hr and psychological impact on employees. So both government as well as enterprises need to work as to how work on the changes that might be emanating out of this shift. The fourth one is the technology debt, which I already talked about. Smart firms are already working to uh, reduce this debt because in last 7 8 months, irrespective of how digitally mature you were, I'm sure you came across areas of weaknesses, areas of improvements in your business because some of the things that you thought will work did not work, and they are most likely coming out of the technology debt that you haven't paid over the years. And the last one, which is around the business resiliency, your ability to quickly bounce back from any uncertain event which disrupts your business or industry will clearly put you in a differentiated state compared to your peers. So these five shifts are coming at us fairly rapidly, and they're going to play out over next few years and in different ways. But one of the things that businesses need to do is to become adaptive, creative, and resilient to deal with this. Let me give you, let me sum it up for you what we call as future fit technology strategy. This is exactly about being adaptive, creative, and resilient. And what it essentially means that you need to have a customer obsessed approach, like the tree that I mentioned a few slides ago. You need to make your business in such a manner that allows you to quickly reconfigure your business model, allow you to quickly change your business structure so that you can deal with the changes that are coming in your industry to your business. And how do you do so? Is by being adaptive, creative, and resilient. I've used this term a lot of time, but I'm going to be explaining it to you as I go forward in the next few slides. Well, adaptivity is about how can you accelerate your ability to be different from what you were based on the changes that are coming at you. So the capabilities that you have built in your business should be able to help you pivot your business, if your large business maybe ever so slightly, help you get into the adjacent businesses using the insights that you've gathered, using the capabilities that you have built, using the partnerships that you've created, help you, for example, move from a product driven company to a services driven company. So that's what being adaptive is about. I'm going to give an example in the next few slides. Creativity is about how do you address the digital sameness that's creeping in? How do you invest in right sort of technologies, and how do you stay ahead of your competition by creating that emotional engagement with your customers? And resiliency, as I mentioned in the past slide as well, is your ability to bounce back irrespective of what kind of crisis your business is facing. Now, MasterCard is a very good example of being an adaptive business. In fact, they have been calling themselves a technology company long before we knew them as an adaptive company. We knew them, all of us know them as a payment processor, but many years ago they decided they no longer want to be just a payment processor. While that's of course their core business, they started investing in technology, they started investing in an adaptable culture, which allowed them to build various capabilities over the years. For example, the data that they had collected on merchants over the payments, etc., they used that to create fraud protection solutions for people who were giving credit to those merchants. So while payment processing is one thing, because of the data and insights and the ability to kind of leverage some of the capabilities that they had, they sort of become a credit protection, a fraud protection service provider to some of the businesses. And that's just one example of many things that they have done. They could do so because starting 2010 or so, they started building in what we call as an adaptive culture. They allowed their employees to explore new ideas, gave them the right tools and platforms and practices, which made them adaptive. The second example that I'm going to share is going to be is going to be around, it's on Cadbury. This is being creative. Now, as we know, creativity is around differentiating from your peers. And what Cadbury did was investing in a platform which allowed them to engage with their customers in a very localized manner. They had collected information across thousands of zip codes in the country or pin codes in the country, and they learned which merchants were carrying their inventory, their product, and then they created this ad on which they could overlay that merchant's information depending on where that customer was watching that ad. That created that instant connection. So if I'm watching this ad sitting in Pune or Delhi, I would actually get a localized information within the ad itself that so and so store is selling this chocolate, and I can go and buy from there. Very interesting. It certainly creates that sort of a personalized and localized engagement. Third one is around resiliency. Now, IT industry is one of the perfect examples. I have quoted you guys in many different forums as to how this industry has been sort of at the forefront of showing resiliency when it came to dealing with pandemic. Within few weeks of the pandemic hitting us, I know most of you were able to achieve 90% or more work from home enablement. That's what that was possible because probably you invested in right sort of technologies, at the same time build partnerships. In fact, one of the IT service provider, I remember they told us how their partnership with some of the equipment provider as well as software provider helped them secure the supply lines for the equipment that they needed to make their employees work remotely. So that's possible because you invested in it. The example that I have on slide is from a healthcare provider where the CIO told us because of the investments, right sort of investments in cloud and integration and some of the capabilities which allowed the employees to work completely in an uninterrupted manner, they were able to continue to churn out IT initiatives when everyone was struggling. In fact, they were able to launch an e-COVID system within 72 hours of lockdowns, etc., being announced. So while adaptivity, creativity, and resiliency are key, they are not possible if you're not investing in the right platforms, right practices, and right partnerships. Let me give you some examples of that. So platforms have become very important in recent times. While you can have two views of it, of course, there's a platform which someone like Paytm would build with which it's interacting or engaging with its customers and providing services to them. And almost every business is looking to become a platform business in one way or the other. At the same time, for building that right sort of capabilities, you need to invest in platforms internally. No longer are the days of piecing together almost individual pieces of technology on your own. For that, you have partners. For that, you have pre-assembled tech sets of technologies which you can quickly deploy to reduce the time to value. For example, for something like Cadbury, what they did around digital engagement, you can actually use digital experience platforms that can reduce your time to value. And most of these platforms also come pre-assembled with some of the emerging technologies so that you do not have to worry about doing all of that plumbing on your own. So platforms are something that's becoming very important in recent times, which are helping you boost efficiency and innovation in your business. The second example is of the SDFC Life. I worked with SDFC Life very closely when I was writing a case study on them. And one of the interesting things that SDFC Life was doing was to become an insurer of the future. They had some of the legacy infrastructure, which, by the way, they continue to hold, and then they're looking to modernize that. But one of the first things that they did was changing their culture, becoming adaptive by by adopting the right sort of practices. So beyond just agile development, design thinking, having the right sort of measurement frameworks that basically help them reduce the governance, increase the speed of innovation by which they can churn out some of the new solutions with so much ease by enabling their digital by citizen developers, people who are much more free to innovate rather than completely bogged down with the bureaucracy or the process discipline. While that's important, but you still need to give that enablement, that freedom for your employees to work and work, but adopting things like low code or cloud or what have you. So processes and practices have become very important. And the third example that I have is from Geo. Now, Geo has built partnerships with Microsoft, and as you know, they are basically launching solutions for small and medium-sized businesses across the globe, across the country. And that's a very good example of how businesses can leverage that partnership. I give you example of IT service provider which build partnership, and that allowed you to kind of become much more responsive or resilient essentially. What Geo is doing is basically creating this partnership in which they can offer new sorts of solutions. They are kind of pivoting. They are becoming adaptive. They are leveraging some of the capabilities that they have in the form of the telecom infrastructure. However, they're adding the cloud capability of Microsoft, then partnering with lots of other small providers to create business solutions which they can take to these merchants who, by the way, might be working on geo retail platform as well, might be available on geo retail platform as well. That's a very good example of partnerships. And I think that's something we're going to see more of, because the days of arm's length relationship, the days of not built here sort of syndrome are long past. We need to have that trusted relationship with our partners. We need to have your, if you're a CIO, you need to work with your technology partners. If you're a business leader, you have to need to work with your business partners much more seamlessly in a trusted manner, which creates sort of win-win proposition for both of you. That's something we're going to see more of. So in summary, what I'm going to say, you need to look at these three P's: platforms, which can help you gain speed and reduce the technology debt; something that can make you, the practices which can make you lightweight; something which can help you achieve newer capabilities at a much faster pace, and then help you do things like agility at scale, etc. At the same time, partnership is something you need to invest in. And as you do these things right, you will become an adaptive, creative, and resilient enterprise, which will make you future fit. And that's what you will need to deal with the upcoming decade, which is going to be full of uncertainty. Lots of challenges will be thrown at you. So, all the best for that. It was really my pleasure to be here and talking to you guys. Thanks for your time. I look forward to engaging with you at some other point. Bye.